Greetings to all lovers of unusual cultural traditions and those who simply dropped by our channel out of curiosity. Today, we will journey to the roof of the world, to Tibet, to explore one of the rarest forms of marriage on the planet. Imagine a society where it is considered normal for several brothers to be married to one woman. Sounds incredible, right? However, in some regions of Tibet, Nepal, and northern India, such practice existed for centuries and partially continues to this day. Today, we will dive into the amazing world of Tibetan polyandry and understand why this unusual form of marriage arose, how it functioned, and what advantages it gave to society living in some of the harshest conditions on the planet. If you're interested in learning about rare cultural phenomena that challenge our notions of normalcy and understanding the logic of customs that seem exotic to us, do not forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. This way, you will not miss new episodes where we explore the amazing diversity of human societies and their unique ways of adapting to the surrounding world. And now prepare for a journey into a world where traditional ideas about family and marriage take on completely different meaning. First, let us understand the term polyandry. This word comes from Greek roots poly, many, and andros, man, and denotes a form of marriage where a woman is in marital relations simultaneously with several men. Polyandry is one of the rarest forms of marriage in the world. While polygamy, was widespread in many cultures throughout history, polyandry was found only in a few societies and usually under very specific ecological and social conditions. The Tibetan form of polyandry has its specificity. It is predominantly fraternal. This means that a woman marries a man and together with him automatically becomes the wife of all his brothers. Such marriage is called fraternal, not because brothers share one wife out of brotherly feelings, although this is also an important aspect, but because all husbands are blood brothers. What did the process of concluding such a marriage look like? Usually the initiative came from the elder brother or from parents. When the elder brother reached marriageable age, usually from 18 to 25 years, the family began looking for a suitable bride for him. The choice was conditioned by many factors: the girl's social status, her reputation, industriousness, health, and ability to have children. After the bride was chosen, negotiations between families took place, which could last several months. Interestingly, the opinion of younger brothers in choosing a bride was usually not taken into account. They automatically became husbands of the woman their elder brother married. However, if a younger brother categorically objected to the marriage, he had the right to leave the family and seek happiness elsewhere. For example, go to a monastery or establish his own household. However, such cases were rare, since separation from the family meant loss of inheritance rights and the necessity to start everything from scratch in the harsh conditions of the Tibetan plateau. After agreement was reached between families, a wedding ceremony took place. Unlike many other cultures where a wedding is a lavish celebration, Tibetan weddings were usually quite modest affairs. The main element of the ceremony was the blessing of a Buddhist monk and the exchange of khadas, traditional ceremonial scarves symbolizing purity of intentions and benevolence. After the wedding, the bride moved to the husband's house, where she became the wife of all brothers living under one roof. A logical question arises: how were intimate relations regulated in such a marriage? This was perhaps the most delicate aspect of polyandrous marriage, and different practices existed in different regions of Tibet. In some places, there was a rotation system where each brother took turns spending the night with his wife. In other areas, the right to intimate closeness with the wife on a particular night was determined by which of the brothers was at home, considering that men were often absent due to trading trips or herding. Sometimes the wife herself chose which husband to spend the night with, but usually tried not to show obvious preferences to avoid jealousy and conflicts between brothers. An interesting custom existed in some areas of Tibet. A husband wishing to spend the night with his wife would leave his shoes at the door of her room, signaling to other brothers that today was his turn. If one of the brothers saw shoes at the door, he understood that he should look for another place to sleep. This simple system helped avoid awkward situations and maintain harmony in the family. Regarding paternity of children born in such marriages, here Tibetans showed amazing wisdom and pragmatism. The biological paternity of a particular child was usually not determined and was not considered important. All children born in a polyandrous marriage were considered common children of all brothers and addressed all of their mother's husbands as father. Sometimes the elder brother was called Big Father, and the younger ones Small Father, or other clarifying terms were used, but all brothers bore equal responsibility for raising and welfare of children. But why did such an unusual form of marriage arise at all? To answer this question, we need to understand the geographical and economic conditions of life in Tibet. The Tibetan plateau is one of the harshest human habitats on the planet. Located at an altitude of more than 4,000 meters above sea level, with extreme temperatures, thin air, and a short growing season, it makes harsh demands on those who try to survive here. In such conditions, land suitable for agriculture was an extremely valuable and limited resource. If each brother married separately and created his own family, land plots would have to be divided into many small parts, making them unsuitable for efficient farming. Polyandry allowed keeping land undivided in the hands of one extended family, which was critically important for survival in Tibet's harsh conditions. Moreover, polyandry ensured efficient division of labor. In traditional Tibetan economy, men performed various functions. Some engaged in plowing and sowing, others herded livestock on highland pastures, still others went on long trading expeditions. Thanks to polyandry, at least one man always remained at home who could protect the family and perform necessary work while other brothers were away. It is important to note the demographic aspect as well. Under conditions of high infant mortality and low life expectancy, polyandry was an effective mechanism of population control. Since several men had children only from one woman, population growth was restrained, which was important under conditions of limited resources. Studies show that in regions where polyandry was practiced, population density was significantly lower than in neighboring areas with monogamous marriages. Another advantage of polyandry was economic stability. If one of the brothers died or became incapacitated, the others continued to care for his children and wife. Thus, polyandrous marriage provided a kind of insurance against life's hardships, which was especially important in a society without formal social protection systems. However, one should not idealize polyandrous marriage. Like any form of family relations, it had its problems and complexities. Jealousy between brothers, despite cultural mechanisms for restraining it, still arose. Women in such marriages faced special difficulties balancing between several husbands and trying not to neglect anyone with attention. There were also conflicts over child rearing, distribution of household duties, and other aspects of shared life. It is interesting to note that, contrary to popular belief, polyandry did not give women in Tibetan society any special status or power. Although a woman in a polyandrous marriage occupied a central position in the family, the patriarchal structure of society was maintained. Major decisions were usually made by men, especially the elder brother, who was considered the head of the family. Nevertheless, compared to women in some other Asian societies of that time, Tibetan women enjoyed relatively greater freedom and respect. It is important to understand that polyandry was not the only form of marriage in Tibet. Alongside it existed monogamous marriages and, more rarely, polygyny. The choice of marriage form depended on the socio-economic position of the family, regional traditions, and other factors. For example, in wealthy families owning large land plots, brothers could afford to marry different women and maintain separate households. In some areas, cross-polyandry was practiced when brothers from one family married sisters from another, creating a complex network of kinship ties. The attitude of Buddhism, Tibet's main religion, toward polyandry was ambiguous. On one hand, Buddhist texts do not approve of polyandry and call for monogamy. On the other hand, Tibetan Buddhism is distinguished by a pragmatic approach to local customs and traditions. Monks usually did not interfere in family affairs of lay people and recognized polyandrous marriages as part of local culture. Moreover, polyandry indirectly contributed to the development of monasticism, since brothers who did not wish to enter into common marriage often went to monasteries, which raised the status and influence of the Buddhist Sangha. What did daily life look like in a polyandrous family? Usually such a family lived in a traditional Tibetan house, built of stone and wood, with a flat roof and inner courtyard. Inside the house, each family member had their duties. The wife usually managed the household, cooked food, wove clothing, raised children, made butter and cheese from yak milk. The elder brother supervised agricultural work and represented the family in public affairs. Younger brothers helped with housework, herded livestock, or engaged in trade. Interestingly, in polyandrous families, there was often a rotation system not only in marital relations but also in household affairs. Brothers took turns going on long trading expeditions or to distant pastures, which allowed efficient use of the family's human resources and maintaining diversity of occupations. Children in polyandrous families were raised by all brothers together, but mothers and grandmothers played a special role. Children's education was usually home-based and practical. Boys learned from fathers skills of agriculture, hunting, trade, while girls mastered domestic crafts under the guidance of mother and other women of the family. More formal education, including reading and writing, was received mainly by children from wealthy families or those preparing for monastic life. Regarding property relations, in a polyandrous family, all property was considered common and indivisible. Land, livestock, house, and other valuables belonged to the entire family, not to its individual members. This created a solid economic foundation for shared life and contributed to family cohesion. Even if one of the brothers left the family, for example by going to a monastery, he usually renounced his property rights in favor of the remaining brothers. With the arrival of Chinese rule in Tibet in the mid-20th century and subsequent social transformations, the practice of polyandry began to gradually disappear. Chinese authorities officially banned polyandry as a feudal relic and carried out land reform that undermined the economic foundation of this form of marriage. In addition, modernization, urbanization, and the influence of global culture led to changes in young Tibetans' ideas about marriage and family. However, despite official bans and social changes, polyandry has not completely disappeared. In remote areas of Tibet, as well as in Tibetan communities of Nepal, Bhutan, and northern India, this practice continues to exist today, although on a smaller scale. According to some estimates, about 10% of marriages in these regions are still polyandrous. Modern researchers note an interesting trend. In some areas, polyandry is experiencing a kind of revival. Faced with economic difficulties and the need to preserve family land, some Tibetan families are returning to the traditional practice of fraternal marriage. This shows that polyandry is not just an exotic custom, but a rational adaptive strategy for life in certain ecological and economic conditions. How do Tibetans themselves view polyandry? Attitudes vary depending on age, education, place of residence, and other factors. The older generation, especially in rural areas, usually considers polyandry a normal and practical form of marriage. For them, it is not exotic, but part of traditional lifestyle. Youth, especially those who received modern education and live in cities, often view polyandry as an outdated custom that does not correspond to modern ideas about love and marriage. Interestingly, when anthropologists ask Tibetan women about their experience of life in polyandrous marriage, many note both positive and negative aspects. Among positive aspects, they include economic stability, division of labor, and the fact that children always have at least one father at home. Among negative aspects, difficulties in managing relationships with several husbands, potential jealousy, and sometimes feelings of social stigmatization in modern society. Regarding children who grew up in polyandrous families, studies show that they are usually well socially adapted and do not experience special psychological problems related to the unusual family structure. For them, having several fathers is normal, part of their cultural experience. Problems more often arise when such children encounter misunderstanding or discrimination from the outside world. It is important to note that polyandry in Tibet was not associated with sexual promiscuity or moral degradation, as Western observers sometimes mistakenly represent. On the contrary, it was a strictly regulated social practice embedded in the system of moral values and economic relations of Tibetan society. Polyandrous marriages were usually stable and long-lasting. Divorces were rare. In the modern world, where monogamy dominates and polygamous forms of marriage are often perceived negatively, Tibetan polyandry represents a unique example of cultural diversity and adaptation to specific environmental conditions. It reminds us that human societies are capable of creating diverse forms of family relations depending on specific historical, ecological, and economic circumstances. Studying such unusual practices as Tibetan polyandry helps us expand our ideas about possible forms of human relations and understand that our own ideas about norm and deviation are culturally conditioned. What seems strange or even unacceptable in one culture can be completely normal and functional in another. Today, when traditional forms of marriage and family worldwide are undergoing transformation, the experience of Tibetan polyandry can give us valuable lessons about the flexibility of family structures, economic solidarity, and mutual support. Ultimately, the main thing in any form of family is not its structure, but the quality of relationships between its members, mutual respect, care, and support. Traditional Tibetan polyandry is not just an exotic custom, but a holistic system of social, economic, and cultural practices that helped people survive and thrive in some of the harshest conditions on Earth. Although this form of marriage is becoming increasingly rare today, its study gives us a unique opportunity to understand the diversity of human societies and their amazing ability to adapt to environmental challenges. So we have taken a fascinating journey into the world of Tibetan polyandry, one of the rarest and most interesting forms of marriage in human history. We learned why brothers married one woman, how such families functioned, and what advantages this unusual practice gave in the harsh conditions of the Tibetan plateau. I hope this journey helped you expand your ideas about the diversity of human cultures and think about how different societies find their unique ways of solving universal problems of survival and prosperity. If you enjoyed this video and want to learn more about unusual cultural practices of various peoples of the world, do not forget to like, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications. This way, you will not miss new episodes about the amazing diversity of human culture. And in the comments, tell us what other unusual forms of marriage and family relations in different cultures you know about. Maybe you have heard of other examples of polyandry or other rare forms of marriage. Share your knowledge and thoughts. In the next episodes, we will continue to explore unique cultural practices of the world's peoples that make us look at familiar things from a new angle and remind us of the incredible diversity of human experience. Stay with us, because understanding other cultures is a path to better understanding ourselves and the world in which we live. Until we meet again.